Marvin Gaye, the Motown soul music legend, could earn $100,000 for a single performance. He was the highest-paid black artist of his era, the voice of a generation, signed to the most powerful label in the country. And when his own father shot him dead, one day before his 45th birthday, Marvin Gaye left behind no will, no fortune, and a mountain of debt so large the government would drain his estate for years to come. We want to show you how that happened, because the money did not vanish. It was taken, piece by piece, by a system that was built to do exactly that. Over the next 20 minutes, we are going to follow the money through 4 turns. The contract that owned him before he ever had a hit. The divorce that he paid for with an entire album. The years he spent hiding from the tax authorities on the other side of an ocean. And the strange afterlife of a fortune that only appeared once he was gone. We start where he started, which is at the bottom, earning $5 a week. In the autumn of 1960, a young singer named Marvin Gaye walked into a small operation in Detroit that most people had never heard of. He was not a star. He was barely a session man. He sat behind a drum kit and played for whatever the label paid him, and what the label paid him was about $5 a week. He played drums on the first record that company ever took to the top of the national charts. The company was Motown, and the man who ran it was Berry Gordy. The building they recorded in, a house on West Grand Boulevard that Gordy had bought for $800, would later become famous as Hitsville, USA. Here is the part that almost no one explains correctly, so we are going to be careful about it. When people say Motown took advantage of its artists, they usually mean it as an insult about one man's character. It was not about character. It was about structure. Motown owned the master recordings of the songs its artists made. Through its publishing company, named Jobiti after Gordy's children, Motown owned the publishing as well. The artist sang the song, but the artist did not own the song, and the artist did not own the recording of the song. Those two things, the master and the publishing, are where almost all of the long-term money in music lives. Marvin Gaye did not have either one. It went further than ownership. Motown ran what it called a finishing school. There were classes in how to walk, how to speak, how to hold a microphone, taught by a woman named Maxine Powell. There was choreography, taught by a man named Charlie Atkins. There were wardrobe costs and travel costs and the cost of the recording sessions themselves. All of that was charged back against the artist. The label spent the money first, and then the label took that money back out of whatever the artist earned before the artist saw a cent. The company that managed the artists, and the company that recorded the artists, and the company that published their songs were, in the end, the same company. We know exactly how thin those royalty rates were because of a number that came out years later, attached to a different group. In 1975, the Jackson 5 discovered that Motown was paying them a royalty of about 2 7/10%. Another label, Columbia, offered them roughly 10 times that, 2 7/10%, against an offer of 27%. That was the gap. That was the machine. Marvin Gaye had been singing inside of for more than a decade. We should be honest that we do not have his exact original percentage written down anywhere we can show you. What we have is the rate Motown paid as a matter of habit, and the long line of people who left in anger over it. The men who wrote some of his biggest songs, the writing team of Holland, Dozier and Holland, sued the label over withheld royalties. Mary Wells, the first real star Motown ever had, left at 21 and took a flat $30,000 rather than fight, and she died with almost nothing. Florence Ballard of the Supremes ended up on public assistance. Marvin Gaye made it out of that bottom tier, and we should give him that. After he fought the label to release the album he believed in, What's Going On, the album Berry Gordy, first called the worst record he had ever heard, Motown came back to the table. In early 1972, they signed him to a new deal reportedly worth $1 million and gave him control over what he recorded. He became, for a moment, the highest-earning black artist in the country. He bought a studio. He bought his parents a house. The Voice had finally been paid something close to what The Voice was worth. And this is the turn where the story stops being about a contract and starts being about a man, because the money that came in did not stay. Marvin Gaye spent. He bought a 5-acre estate with stables for horses he had no real interest in. He bought a piece of a professional basketball team. He bought property in Jamaica, more than a dozen cars, a speedboat, a small yacht, a recreational vehicle, tractors. He took financial stakes in professional boxers, paying their training and their living costs against money they might earn in the future. And that money mostly never came. In 1 year in the middle of the 1970s, he was earning around $20,000 a month, and his production company cleared well over $1 million in profit. And in that same stretch, he could not make a support payment of $5,500 a month. His biographer, David Ritz, who knew him personally and spent years with him, put it plainly. Ritz said Gaye did not have a money manager, that he probably had no idea how much he owed the tax authorities, and that he almost seemed to take pleasure in the irresponsibility of it. Underneath the spending, there was something pulling him down on purpose, and the people closest to him saw it. But the tax authorities did not deal in what was underneath. They dealt in what was owed, and what was owed was growing. Before the tax bill came due all the way, there was the divorce, and the divorce produced one of the strangest things any major artist has ever made. We need to slow down here, because this is the part that gets told wrong almost every single time. Marvin Gaye had married Anna Gordy. She was Berry Gordy's sister, and she was 17 years older than he was. The marriage came apart slowly and bitterly across the middle of the 1970s. Anna filed, and Gaye did what he did with most obligations he did not want to face. He did not show up. He ignored court orders. He kept spending money he was supposed to be handing over. Anna's side asked for $1 million. What Gaye's attorney came up with was unusual enough that law professors still write about it. Motown was going to advance Gaye a sum of money, reported at around $305,000, for an album he had not yet made. Gaye would give that advance to Anna. On top of it, he would give her the first chunk of the royalties that the album earned once it came out. Add the advance and the royalties together, and you reach $600,000, which is what Anna agreed to accept instead of the $1 million. The money for the divorce would come out of a record that did not yet exist. So Marvin Gaye sat down and made that record. He made a double album about the end of his marriage to Anna Gordy. He titled it, "Here, My Dear, A Bitter Little Gift," as if to say, "Here, this is yours. Now take it." He put the disintegration of the marriage onto the record itself, the resentment, the longing, the accounting of who did what to whom. For decades, the story that got passed around was that a judge had forced him to surrender every dollar the album made, and that Gaye, furious, deliberately recorded something terrible so that it would sell nothing and Anna would get nothing. That version is satisfying. It is also not true, and we are not going to repeat it as if it were. The fact-checking outfit Snopes went through this one carefully. There was no judge ordering him to hand over all the royalties. It was a settlement he and his lawyer had negotiated themselves. And here is the detail that kills the revenge story completely. If here, my dear earned less than what he owed Anna, the shortfall did not become her problem. It became his. He still had to make up the difference out of his own pocket. Tanking the record on purpose would not have hurt her. It would only have hurt him. The album sold modestly and was misunderstood for years, and only much later did people come to regard it as one of the more honest things he ever did. A Motown sales executive named London Miller said most people simply did not get it, that Gaye had made an album about his own divorce and made it with real craft, and the audience of the time was not ready to hear it. That is the second turn. He paid for the end of his marriage with a piece of music. Now we come to the tax authorities, and to an ocean. The tax debt had been building the whole time, quietly, because no one was minding it. By the start of the 1980s, the figure reported in the press was severe. One widely repeated account puts his total debts at around $9 million, with something like $4.5 million of that owed specifically to the tax authorities. We want to be straight with you about that number, because it matters, and because it is not as solid as it sounds. It traces back largely to a single estate planning firm, and it has been copied across the internet ever since. Other accounts from the time are lower. One careful telling puts the back taxes owed at his death closer to $1.5 million. A music industry report from 1978 estimated his total debts at around $7 million. The honest summary is this: he owed an enormous amount, more than he could pay, and the precise figure depends on which source you trust. What is not in dispute is that the government was coming, and that he ran. He ran first to Hawaii. The tax authorities had effectively shut down his studio in California. He was evicted from where he was living, and one of the most awarded voices in the history of American music ended up living in the back of an abandoned bakery truck, a bread van, with his young son. He tried to end his life there with an overdose of cocaine. In his own words, given to David Ritz, he said he had given up, that the problems were too big, that he wanted to be left alone to blow his brains away with high-octane drugs, that it would be a slow but relatively pleasant death, certainly less messy than a gun. He said that about himself. There was a moment in there where he thought he saw a way out, and it tells you everything about how he thought about money by then. He had put his hopes, and his money, into a boxer named Andy Price. In the autumn of 1979, Price stepped into the ring against Sugar Ray Leonard. Gaye believed that if Price won, the future earnings would clean up his entire financial disaster in a single night. He said exactly that. With one blow, he said, he could clean up his whole financial mess. Leonard knocked Price out in the first round. From Hawaii, he went to London, where the tax exile became something close to permanent, and where the drug use deepened. And from London, a man came and found him who had no real reason to help him. A Belgian promoter named Freddie Cousser tracked Gaye down and brought him to a quiet seaside town called Ostend on the coast of Belgium. Cousser described what he found. He said he almost did not recognize him. Pale, he said, skinny, nervous, and broke. That was the state of the man at that point. Cousser took him in, put him up, got him walking on the beach, and away from the worst of the drugs. And it was there, in that small town across the ocean from everything he had built and lost, that Marvin Gaye slowly began to write again. The song he wrote in that borrowed apartment by the North Sea was Sexual Healing. That is the third turn. The fortune was gone, the studio was gone, the country was behind him, and he was starting over in Ostend with almost nothing. Which brings us to the comeback, and to the cruel shape of it. What Gaye wrote in Ostend became the song that brought him all the way back. Around the same time, the people who ran the business worked out his escape from Motown. In the spring of 1982, Columbia Records, part of CBS, bought him out of his Motown contract. The reported price was $1.5 million, and on top of that, Columbia had to agree to pay Motown an ongoing cut, an override, on his future record sales. So even as he left, the old label was still attached to the money he had not yet earned. But the part of that deal that tells you the most is the part about the tax authorities. Before Columbia would sign him, the company agreed to deal with his debt to the government, reported at over $1 million in unpaid back taxes. The comeback was built around the tax problem. The terms of the contract were kept deliberately quiet, in part so that the arrangement with his creditors would not be disturbed. The executive who brought him in, a man named Larkin Arnold, later said the project had taken at least 30 years off his life. The record came out. Sexual Healing was an enormous hit, the biggest-selling single of his entire career. It won 2 Grammy Awards and topped the charts for months. The album it appeared on, Midnight Love, sold in the millions. By any measure that the public could see, Marvin Gaye had risen from the dead. And underneath that public triumph, the money was doing what it had always done, which is flow toward everyone except him. It went to the buyout, to the override, to the back taxes, to the people he owed. He had made one of the great comebacks in the history of the business, and he was still, by the accounts of the people around him, a man digging out of a hole rather than a man getting rich. He came home. He moved into his parents' house in Los Angeles, and on the 1st of April, 1984, one day before he would have turned 45, his father, Marvin Gaye Sr., shot and killed him in that house. He died without a will. He died, by the most repeated accounting, around $9 million in debt, with the tax authorities still owed several million. The voice that had earned $100,000 a night left behind an estate that was, on paper, worth less than nothing. That is where the account would end, except that it does not end there, because of the one asset he could not spend and could not lose. He never owned his masters. He never owned most of his publishing in the Motown years. But the songs he wrote, the compositions themselves, those carried a value that outlived him and outlived the debt. Under the law, with no will, his estate passed to his 3 children once the creditors were satisfied. And for years, the tax authorities took nearly everything the music earned, reportedly around $1 million a year, pulling the debt down one royalty check at a time. Slowly, the estate climbed out of the hole he had left. And then, decades after his death, the compositions did something he never got to see. In 2013, a record by Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams called Blurred Lines sat at the top of the charts around the world. Gaye's children believed it had taken from Got to Give It Up, one of their father's songs from 1977. The case went to a jury, and there was a strange wrinkle in it. The children had inherited the writing of his songs, but not the recordings, so the jury was never allowed to hear Marvin Gaye's own voice singing the original. They decided the case on sheet music and on experts. The jury sided with the family. After the appeals were finished, the final figure landed at just under $5 million, along with a continuing share of whatever that hit song earned in the future. The children who had been left with debt and no will collected a copyright infringement judgment in their father's name from one of the biggest songs in the world. We have been careful with the numbers in this account because the numbers are where this story is usually told carelessly. There is one figure we want to leave you with, and it is not a dollar figure. Marvin Gaye spent more than 20 years inside a system that owned the recordings of his voice and the publishing of his songs, and charged him for the privilege of working inside it. He earned fortunes and kept almost none of it. He hid from his own government in the back of a bread van. And the thing that finally paid his children was the one thing the machine never managed to take from him, which was the writing itself, the songs as he first put them down. He just never lived in a version of the story where any of that money reached his hands.